Welcome to the 2023 Grad Futures Forum, the Graduate Student Professional Development Conference hosted by the Graduate School at Princeton University. My name is Eva Kubu, and I'm the Associate Dean for Professional Development and Director of Grad Futures. We're delighted you could join us for this Day 3 of the 4th year of this annual conference, designed to support graduate student futures at Princeton and beyond. Since the launch of Grad Futures in fall of 2019, the Graduate School has continued to expand its commitment to professional development. Grad Futures now serves as Princeton's hub for empowering graduate student futures through a broad spectrum of skills training, mentorship, bespoke experiential opportunities, and interdisciplinary exploration. We created this annual conference to both advance the professional development of our own graduate students and to serve graduate communities beyond Princeton by opening up the conference to other institutions. Each year, registrations continue to pour in from across the country and around the globe, a testament to the imperative of investing in comprehensive professional development to empower the next generation of scholars, researchers, entrepreneurs, and leaders. Many thanks to my amazing Grad Futures colleagues and our graduate student professional development associates, and to Dean Rodney Priestley, the Dean of the Graduate School, for his strong support, as well as our dedicated graduate alumni partners, campus partners, expert speakers, and industry partners, without whom this conference would not be possible. My next session that I have the pleasure to introduce is from English PhD to Ithaka S+R, a conversation with Colette Johnson, a graduate alumna and PhD alumna of the class of 2018, stepping off the traditional academic faculty pathway, that well-trodden road leading from assistant to associate to full professor can feel daunting, especially after most PhDs have invested over a decade of time pursuing a linear training model that leads them from an undergraduate degree to a graduate degree to the completion of a dissertation. How do professionals outside the academy create and maintain networks, move between roles and industries, and tolerate the uncertainty that accompanies all of the above? This afternoon's session features Colette Johnson, who knows very much about this topic. She will be in conversation with Sadia El-Karfi-Azroun, a PhD candidate in French and Italian at Princeton. Colette is the Director of Strategy and Operations at Ithaka S+R, a New York-based research and consulting firm that studies higher education. She founded and runs the Ithaka S+R Fellowship Program. She also serves as Professor of Practice for the Calhoun Honors Discovery Program at Virginia Tech. Colette received her PhD in English from Princeton in 2018. Sadia El-Karfi-Azroun is a PhD candidate in the Department of French and Italian at Princeton, who was born and raised in Rabat, Morocco. Sadia's current research focuses on monsters and the interdisciplinary explorations in monstrosity and their interconnections with the representational practices of sexuality and gender in Francophile literature and film from North Africa. Welcome, Colette and Sadia.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for this great introduction, Eva. I'm really excited to be here, to be talking to Colette and learning more about her path towards Ithaka. I have a lot of questions for Colette today, but I want to make sure that other students who are present with us today feel empowered to ask their own questions as we keep going into the conversation further. So if you do have a question, feel free to interject in the chat and somebody will forward your question to me and I will ask Colette that question. So I guess I can just go ahead and start with my first question for you, Colette. My first question is, can you tell us a little bit about your time at Princeton and the work that you did here as a grad student and PhD?
Great. Well, thank you so much for being here and for being my interlocutor in this conversation. I'm really excited for what we're going to talk through today. And I also wanted to say thank you so much to Eva and James and the entire Princeton team that has made this possible. I'm a huge advocate for professional development for graduate students and for the public humanities and the value of that. So I'm really excited. So you were asking me about my experiences, as a graduate student and sort of the path here. So as Eva mentioned in the introduction, my background is that I have a PhD in English literature, and currently I work as Director of Strategy and Operations for Ithaka S+R, and we are a not-for-profit research and consulting firm, and we do research on higher education. We are based in New York City, but the scope of our work is national. So I sort of landed here because and I really kind of have to go back in time and think through some of my earlier career experiences to kind of chart the path for how I went from there to the PhD to my current role. One of my early formative experiences was one of my first roles right out of undergraduate college. And I worked with a team that was launching a special education program in a in a low income, very underprivileged, very under-resourced high school district. And it was challenging work, and it was really rewarding work. The program we were launching was a transition program, which means that it helped students between the ages of 18 to 22 transition from high school into the workforce or into a associate's degree or whatever was next for them. And I really just learned in that experience that having a service-oriented career was really core to my values as a professional. I learned that I really enjoyed working with a team of people who were passionate about the same things that I'm passionate about. And I also was very frustrated at times, feeling like we were constantly being in this reactive mode of responding to day-to-day challenges. And I kept thinking, how do you make a difference at a systemic level? And for me, that was kind of the guiding, like the North Star of when I went to get my PhD and kind of what I was interested in. So, I approached, the experience of a graduate student as really having these questions, but wanting to get back into a more service-oriented career. And that was kind of sort of defined how I was trying to find different professional experiences that went hand in hand with the experience of graduate school, and helped me kind of think through what the different options were after graduation.
That's great. Thank you so much for your answer. And as I can see here, it's still continuing. And this career that is oriented towards service and helping students is continuing to this day, with you being here, giving your advice and time to graduate students here at Princeton. So thank you so much for this. My next question is, what were some of the skills and experiences that you had here as a PhD student that really prepared you the most for your current career and current role at Ithaka?
Yeah, that's a really great question. Thank you for asking it. And I do hope that this is as conversational as possible. And I know that you're also a graduate student. And so if there's any input that you have about what you've found to be really useful, or I hope you'll jump in.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, I think a lot of the soft skills that I learned have been essential and crucial to my current role. And I knew that those were the things that I excelled at doing and that I enjoyed doing. And I'll get into kind of a little bit more of the details, but I think that communication skills, I mean, I am a humanities PhD. I am now in an industry where I work doing a lot of strategy work, which involves a lot of relationship management. So that was relationship management. It was a skill that I developed, during my PhD, thinking through how do you manage, different advice from different mentors and different advisors, and how do you define a project that you care about while also taking into consideration that there are other people around you who have different ideas and might be pushing you in one direction or another, and kind of really wanting to preserve the relationships of all of that, and sort of, manage, different people's expectations. That was something important. Communications, of course. So written, I do a lot of grant writing, or grant writing is kind of where I came from. I think my role has I've been very fortunate that my role has kind of evolved where I am right now. I think self-management and being able to create a plan and then implement a plan. That's something that I really gained when I was doing the dissertation, because I think that's as anyone who is a current student or has a PhD knows, that's very self-driven, self-motivated work, and it's taking a big project and being able to define a scope, being able to set milestones, being able to stay accountable to yourself, and so I think a lot of those have been really helpful in transitioning into a workplace and being able to help collaborate with and sometimes coach different teams and different colleagues. I'm thinking through kind of those project skills and also those sort of self-management.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much. And I think along with self-management comes this idea of networking that a lot of students in the graduate school and the PhD programs feel a little bit awkward doing. So how do you think grad students can utilize networking to their advantage? And perhaps you could even tell us a little bit about how networking helped you in your own career.
Absolutely. So I do, and it's funny because I was just having a conversation earlier this afternoon about networking, so it's like very on point. So I think that academics do just as much networking as other careers. I think that as an academic, we wouldn't necessarily use that word of networking, but going to professional conferences, meeting people in your field, delivering works in progress papers, getting feedback from your peers, writing and publishing and responding to journal articles. All those are kind of forms of professional networking that are recognizable and common in academia. But in the professional world, we call it networking. Maybe it looks a little bit different. And the other thing to keep in mind that I was told as a graduate student, but it took me a while for that to really sink in, is just how normal and even expected networking is for pretty much every industry, right? So I think I felt very self-conscious when I was a student about just emailing someone and asking for 20 minutes of their time to talk about their career. I think I felt really awkward about that. I also thought that when I thought of networking, I thought of one specific type of activity, not the whole range of thinking going and getting a coffee with someone is a really high touch form of networking, whereas connecting with them on LinkedIn and then following their posts to see what resources they share for your industry or field is a very low touch, very accessible form of networking, and again, people, if you have something in common, if you've if you're in the same type of role or the same industry, it's very common to just connect with people, and you can learn sort of fantastic, great things that way. And
yeah, absolutely. Networking has been a great tool I've utilized myself within the grad school and outside the grad school. So I can't emphasize enough the importance of networking and tapping into all the networks that you may have, whether it be professional or personal.
Do you have any examples of what's worked for you?
Yes, absolutely. Connecting with alumni from my undergrad has been super helpful. The stories, I went to an undergrad called Mount Holyoke College. It's an all-women's college, but we have a great community of other women's colleges called the Seven Sisters. So I've joined all these Facebook groups, and I continue to ask questions on those Facebook groups and boards. And whenever I am looking at an opportunity, I ask on those boards if anyone has any connections there or advice, or if perhaps they work there and they could advise me on how to proceed with an application or even forming a connection with somebody who works there.
Oh, and it's amazing how, when you leverage your network where you have an affiliation, but then it's those second and third degree connections, that there's a lot of sort of power in having that broader network.
Absolutely.
And another thing you brought up is that when I was a graduate student, I got some of the best feedback when I was trying to develop material like resume and cover letter materials from people who I had met through informational interviews, who were able to look at my resume and give me feedback based on the norms of their industry.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's great advice. And people, when you connect with them, they're always very willing and happy to talk about their experiences and their time at that organization or company. So definitely our advice today is to be empowered to do that. Thank you so much, Colette. Well, my next question is about PhD students at Princeton who are either in their early career here or later in their programs, and they are perhaps considering a shift from the traditional quote unquote academic route of going to the job market, and being a professor. And they're considering making a transition similar to the one you made. What would be your advice for those students, and what should they be doing, and how should they be thinking about this?
Absolutely. So I think exploring different options for your career is incredibly important, especially at this time. I don't think there's too early to start. And I think that there are like a range of like really low-hanging fruit to more invested ways of exploring different career types, because I think it's hard to know exactly what you are going to enjoy doing and excel at doing and what you connect with until you experience it on some level. So I think reading blogs about what it's like, what the day-to-day is like for different jobs is good. I mean, that's something like just desk research that anyone can do. I think then having informational interviews, having networking conversations with people who you know or who you're able to connect with, and the Princeton Alumni Network is a magical thing and everyone should be using it. But just, being able to talk to people in different roles and really being able to ask in an informational interview, I found this so interesting about what we discussed today. Is there anyone else in your organization who I might be able to connect with that I could learn more about that from? And just really exploring different options. I think that will really help rule in or rule out different options. And I know that I had informational interviews where I was like, that's super interesting. And I had others where I was like, I have no interest in that sort of like, career path. And that's really good, because that's half an hour of your time and someone's time, and you can learn so much from it. But then I think using those first two things to help you be really selective and targeted about higher investment opportunities like internships and fellowships, because I think if you're a graduate student, I think there's a lot of transferable skills you get from just having the experience of teaching and doing research. But I think having industry experience and having some sort of professional, like legibly professional experience on your resume is very valuable. Something you can talk about, a deliverable you worked on or contributed to, or how you work with a colleague in an interview or in a cover letter. I think those experiences are really important. So I think just being strategic about, starting off, like sort of exploring different options. And then when you have a better sense of what you're interested in, like trying to get like a trial of that.
Absolutely. And I think it's very important what you just said about really asking questions about what it's like to be in that role or that organization. And sometimes, the positive answers that really make us excited, that's great. But also the eye-opening statements that may be about an organization or a role that might not be exciting for you, that's still a gain that you took away from that conversation. So that's great. I have a few more questions, but I'm going to stop here to see if the audience might have some questions for us. Do we think we have some questions? Okay, great. We have a question from Hanro, and they're asking you, Colette, how to find job opportunities for non-academic positions. What strengths do PhDs have in applying these jobs?
So is the question about like where to find the jobs, and then also is it kind of, I'll take it in two parts. If
that's great. Yeah, that's great.
So I think in terms of where to sort of find jobs, I think there are job boards. I I'm trying to think, and I can look up at some of the places that I used when I was like looking.
Yeah.
Because there was a couple like really good, really helpful job posting boards. Bridgespan has one where they have like a marketplace, you know, like a bulletin where there's different job opportunities that come up. Sometimes looking in like newsletters. So like you know, in whatever field you're interested in, but like, you know, Inside Higher Ed has like, or like the Chronicle Philanthropy is like another one where, you know, they'll have like a weekly newsletter.
Okay.
You know, I think LinkedIn can be a good resource. I think you have to approach it strategically. Like, I think the roles on LinkedIn tend to not necessarily be, sometimes they're not entry-level roles. I think LinkedIn has a reputation for having more like mid-career kind of level roles posted there, which I do think that PhDs can qualify for. And that kind of is part 2 of the question that was asked. But I do think if you're searching for opportunities on LinkedIn, I think like preparing for that, doing some networking, like identifying organizations or companies you're interested in or care about in advance, like 6 months before you plan on launching a job search, and trying to connect, like trying to have a list of these are 10 organizations that I'm really interested in. And trying to connect with people there, because that way, if you see something like posted, an opportunity posted for that company on LinkedIn, then you have a connection there. You can kind of, you know, inquire a little bit or like ask more. So I think with LinkedIn, that's kind of the trick with it. In terms of, you know, like how you can, the second part of the question, I think, and if you remind me, it was like, what skills, right?
Yes, what skills to utilize in that job search, I think.
So I think, I was thinking more skills like on your resume. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So, you know, I was thinking it kind of depends on the industry, and it is a best practice no matter what you're applying to, that you are tailoring your materials to some degree to that role. I don't think that means that you spend 2 hours like writing a new cover letter for every single position you're applying to. But I do think that some customization, like looking at the job description, figuring out 3 to 5 keywords from the job description, making sure that those are incorporated into your resume or cover letter is the best practice. And what some of those things are, you know, I think it kind of depends on what the role is, right? So like if it's a quantitatively heavy role, like those are probably, you know, things that you're going to want to ask if you have this quantitative skill, like mention them in your skills section of your resume. If it's sort of, if you have a PhD in a more humanities based field, I think really talking about any concrete milestones, deliverables, or metrics that quantify the kind of work you've done is really, really important. So maybe if you had an opportunity to lead a colloquium while you were a current student, did you manage a budget for that colloquium? Did you collaborate with other peers or staff in terms of the event planning for that? That shows that you're collaborative, that shows you teamwork skills. How many students or attendees did you reach? You know, if it was a virtual event, how many people signed up for the events? You know, like any ways that you can kind of really put concrete actions and activities on your materials, I think is great.
Absolutely. Don't tell me what you did, but how did you do it? And what were the deliverables? I guess that's something to focus on. Yeah, absolutely. I do have more questions about the resume, and I'll come back to that later. But we do have another question here by Chibozor. And they're asking, during your study program, did you face the stereotype that desiring non-academic jobs is a mark of incompetence in your field? If yes, how did you handle this? Thank you so much for this question.
I'm so glad. This is a tough question. I'm glad that someone asked it. You know, in my experience at Princeton, I felt that I was very fortunate to have a set of advisors that were supportive of my decision. And I will also say that I knew fairly early on in my graduate student career that I wasn't interested in researcher roles or tenure track jobs. And I think like I didn't it wasn't that long ago that I was a student, like it, but I would say that even in that period of time, even in like, you know, 10, a little over 10 years since I started as a graduate student, I think things have changed a lot. And I think things at Princeton have changed a lot. Like just even the existence of this forum that we're participating in now is phenomenal and is really sort of exciting. But I do think that the stigma around wanting to explore other career paths is lessening, maybe not equally in every department. I think there's pressure, there could be pressure from advisors or faculty. For me, there was a lot of peer pressure. I think even more peer pressure than pressure from my advisors or from any faculty members that I was interacting with. I think that was something I sort of grappled with. But I think also, I think that having the clarity of knowing why I was getting the PhD and like having a clear sense of like, I believe in the public humanities and I believe that like what I'm doing will add value to help improve like the public good. Like actually, if I didn't have that, I think it would have been incredibly hard to finish the dissertation at all. Like the dissertation is such a challenging sort of experience.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think it's great that, you know, this question was asked and your advice is very valuable. And I think it all comes down to confidence, like walk in your pathway and your path to your career with complete confidence in yourself and what you're doing. And there are folks who will support you. So definitely just develop the right network and the right mentoring that you need.
That's a fantastic point. I'm so happy that you said mentors, because I will say, I think having mentors who were not my advisors was very, very important for me having balance. Like I needed people who were advocating for me in my research and challenging me to like really produce a dissertation that was original and exciting. But I think I needed different mentors to help me chart my professional pathway. And I think that's totally okay to sort of have different people who advocate for different needs that you have. And just recognizing, you know, that you need like a whole team of mentors supporting you, and that everyone has something really valuable to contribute.
Absolutely. It does take a village.
Yeah.
It's true. And I guess my follow-up question about mentoring, because I do believe in mentoring and I do believe in paying it forward. But what were some of the places you looked into mentors you looked for in mentoring? Yeah.
So one of my most important mentors who I still am in touch with and, you know, who I care about very, very much, I met at an event. It was in person because this was like, you know, way before COVID and pandemics and virtual events, but it was an event that Princeton hosted on sort of a career pathways session. And this was someone who had a PhD in the humanities and who had made the shift into a public humanities career, and they were the speaker. And I just went up to them after the event and introduced myself. And I said, could we connect? Could we get a coffee sometime? And we did, and it turned into an internship. And then it turned, after the internship, it's someone who, you know, I just cared a lot about, and we kept in touch. So, you know, that was sort of one example. And then another person who has been really important mentor to me was actually my college roommate's aunt. Works at a tech company. She's a lawyer. And, you know, like just connected with me because I was like her, you know, niece's roommate and like a friend. And we ended up just like totally hitting it off, like very good, like personality fit. And that's someone, you know, it's not someone who I'm calling up every month. It's someone who we talk once or twice a year, but have talked once or twice a year for years. And so, you know, it's just funny, you know, mentors, like you just have to stay open-minded because again, like it's good to have diversity in your mentors, and it's really good to have them coming from different places.
Absolutely. Great. Thank you so much. I wonder if we have more questions, but I don't think we do right now. And feel free to ask your questions in the chat, everyone who's here attending. There are so many things that Colette can tell us about her experience that would be super helpful for all of us PhD students. I guess my next question to you revolves around this word, uncertainty. And uncertainty can be daunting for graduate students, whether it be about when they will finish their dissertation, if they will get a job, whether they're going into an academic traditional route, or they're finding a job in a different area in the world. How do you think grad students should face uncertainty, and what would be your advice for them?
I'm so glad that you asked this question. I don't know if I have like the perfect answer, and if you have any thoughts on how you've like managed uncertainty. I think this is really something that everyone faces and people don't talk about enough. So I think it's good to like just sit here and kind of like think through it out loud together. You know, I'm thinking in a couple of different directions. I think for one, in terms of a career, I have never been a proponent and a huge fan of like having a plan. Like, this is my 5-year plan, or this is my 10-year plan. I think being too rigid can actually close down certain opportunities or options that you never know could be totally eye-opening and fantastic and really exciting. But so I think it's good to stay open-minded, to stay flexible. And I have tried, and I can say this retrospectively, I don't know, like if I was thinking this self-consciously, like at the time, but I have tried to orient my goals around values rather than around like a plan per se. So really saying like, at this time in my career, what are the priorities in my life? Like, you know, a time of huge uncertainty for me was, it was like 2 years before I defended, and my husband decided to go back and get another master's degree, an MFA in fiction writing, which is, you know, we made the decision together that that's something that was important to us as a family and that we wanted to do, but it's not like going back to like get an MBA. It's like getting a degree in fiction. And it was like, you know, I was going to have to go in the job market. I couldn't apply to jobs not knowing which program and where we were going to be in the country. So it was like this domino effect of being like, okay, well, you're going to have to get admitted first, and then we have X number of months before, you know, you're going to have to start. And am I going to move with you? Are we going to be long distance for a while? It was a lot of uncertainty to manage, and the dissertation on top of that. But just really thinking through values and really recognizing like, you know, for me, my relationship was important, you know, and like maintaining that and knowing that like a job is a job and it will work out, but people are important to me, and being able to prioritize people over, like, you know, he's going to have to go to this city to do this program, and I have to go get this academic job in this other city. Like, that just wasn't a value, you know, that wasn't more important for us. So just, this is a long-winded way of saying that, like, kind of having that values-focused approach to planning was important. And then the other thing, which is like in a totally different kind of mindset, is that like for my dissertation, I had so much uncertainty. I was really struggling to make progress. I felt sort of adrift and untethered, and having a hard time like organizing my thoughts into something that was like, you know, chapters and everything. And I felt like actually getting a full-time job, like, it's kind of the inverse of what you were saying earlier. Like, you asked me what skills were transferable from your PhD to your job. I'd say, what skills are transferable from my job to my PhD? You know? Like working full-time really clarified for me. And I worked full-time and finished my dissertation for about 10 months and was doing kind of it side by side. It clarified for me, like, a dissertation has pieces, and those pieces need deadlines, and this is how much time you have to work on those pieces, and then they need to get done, right? Absolutely. So yeah, like for me, again, with the uncertainty, it was just having the certainty and the structure of a like 9-to-5 job helped give more structure to the ambiguity of kind of the research.
Absolutely. Thank you for this advice. It's very important for grad students to feel the confidence to start talking about, you know, what is important for them and what are the values that are super important for them. And I think when you mentioned family, that's something I can relate to as well. And that's going to impact very heavily my decision moving forward, because I do value family and I want to be near family. So thank you so much for sharing that with us and being open. The next question we have here is from a student, KK. How do you retain environment and mindset on pursuit of intellectual rigor and analysis of society beyond monetary interests? These tend to be more, quote unquote, natural in the academia.
So I'm interpreting this question as just sort of asking around how outside of academia, how do you stay intellectually challenged? How do you can have a career that contributes to the public good? So, you know, for me, that was never like a negotiable point for me in my career. Having a career that's service-oriented, having a career that benefits the public good is something that was just always central for me. So when I was looking at different sort of opportunities and when I was looking for professional opportunities as a graduate student, you know, I was looking in like higher education administration, you know, different kinds of like dean opportunities, digital humanities opportunities, fundraising development grant offices, you know, on campuses. My internship, I worked with a grant maker, so got some experience in philanthropy. I did do a short period as a consultant for a company, and this was like a for-profit company, but very mission oriented, like in the sense that like they were very they were very selective about the kinds of work they do, and they really wanted to have a good product that wasn't exploitative. So I don't think it necessarily always matters whether it's not for profit or for-profit companies, but like I've been selective in the kinds of things that I've wanted to do. But definitely for me, I sort of narrowed down. I was really interested in organizations that produced measurable impact, but weren't providing like a direct service. So like, you know, I ended up at this research firm, which is sort of like a think tank. So thinking about that, like applied research, and I'm on the operational side of that work, which means that like the things that I do on a day-to-day basis have like very clear outputs and measurements, right, associated with them. And like, I wanted that. Like, I didn't want just, I didn't feel fulfilled just publishing and that being the impact for me, and for some people that's fine, but for me, I wanted something that was more like tangible. But thinking at philanthropy, thinking at other types of organizations that are like that in sort of research and consulting and strategy consulting and think tanks was kind of where I was looking to kind of like, you know, continue on with that sense of contributing to the public good, but also sort of having measurable impact. Absolutely.
And I think your story speaks to this question in a way, because you work with Ithaka S+R, and I know personally what Ithaka S+R does, but I think I'll ask you in just a second to tell the audience members a little bit about the work that Ithaka S+R does and how involved it is with higher education and education in general, and the impact that this work has on various communities. But also, I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about your involvement as a professor currently, and what that entails, so that students can understand a little bit about sort of this notion of the life of the mind and how you're still involved with academia, you're still impacting academia as a whole.
Yeah, and I you know, 6 years ago, I would never have predicted that I would have this opportunity. So I'm serving as a professor of practice for a partner of ours with Virginia Tech, and it's the Calhoun Honors Program. And we are the industry partner, and we support students in the program who work with industry partners to solve sort of real world challenges. And so our group of students is focused on improving higher education in prisons. And so that's an area that's part of our research portfolio. So we support them by mentoring them, by providing subject matter expertise, by helping them with our networks. And so we interact with the students periodically throughout the semester and throughout the year as they are working towards making a higher education course available in a prison in their state.
Mhm.
And it's just been very rewarding to be able to work with undergraduate students. And in some ways, it goes back to kind of one of my earlier experiences about transition. You know, it really is focused at this intersection
Mhm.
of practice and education, which I find very exciting to sort of be at that place. And I feel very excited to be able to work with students. I like working with students, to see their excitement and how it's clicking for them and how what they're learning in an academic sort of like separate space, but how there's real world impact of what they do and how there's applicability for what they do.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for this answer. And hopefully we answered KK's question. My next question here, well, not mine, another student's next question is from Sahana. And they're asking, speaking of uncertainty, were there times where you felt unemployable, so to speak, as in who's going to give me a job? If yes, how did you deal with that feeling and any steps that you took?
Oh, wow. I don't know that I ever felt fully unemployable, but I absolutely worried about what kinds of jobs were available to me that would take advantage of my training and my interests. And I think advice that I was told, which in retrospect, maybe I kind of agree with, kind of don't, is like the idea that like, if you're getting a PhD, you're acquiring really advanced subject matter expertise, but that you might have to take a more entry-level role to start off because you don't have prior work experience. I do think, and I work with our fellows a lot, so I do see a lot of people at different career stages. I do think there is an adjustment period to going from working in the academy as an industry to working in an office culture or working in another professional environment. I think that one of the biggest adjustments I see our fellows go through is the speed at which work happens. You know, like, you know, you're answering your emails within 24 hours, not within several weeks.
Right, exactly.
Which is ever, you know, for an academic norm. But it's sort of like the speed and the pace of work, and also just kind of like office culture and the sort of maybe even a more informality of, you know, the office culture. I think those are things that people like kind of have to learn. But honestly, you can do that while you're a student by having some kind of internship or fellowship. And I think Princeton has been amazing at making sure that those opportunities are available for students and that they're paid, which I think is really, really important.
Absolutely.
And then I think that also my value in my workplace has actually not been as a subject matter expert. And that is sort of disciplinarily specific because I'm a humanist. I do think that some people who get PhDs in like the hard sciences are going into jobs that are very directly like drawing on their hard skills. But for me, I think that some of my most transferable skills have been around being a generalist and being able to like pivot and problem solve very agilely. So I'm sorry, I'm kind of going down a rabbit hole. And the question was really around like, have you ever felt unemployable? Like, I just think this is much easier said than done, and I want to acknowledge that. But I think it's really important not to sell yourself short. Like, I think it's really, really important to remember it's incredibly challenging to be accepted to Princeton in a graduate program in the first place. People who come here are, I've never met someone who is a Princeton alum who is not exceptional.
Right.
And I think it can be really hard to kind of like draw out those skills and get comfortable with sort of the self-branding and the self-advocacy that needs to happen for a job search. But I think that there is no one here who has come through these programs that is unemployable.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'm so glad you mentioned that a lot of PhD students think that if they want to transition, they will have to start at an entry-level position. And I think students should capitalize on all these social impacts fellowships and other fellowships that the Grad Futures program makes available for us, so that we can work on these skills. So when we're trying to make a transition, we will not just be entry-level people. Great, thank you so much. We have a few more questions, a couple actually. So I'll ask the first one from Chubazor, And they're asking, what systems did you put in place to ensure that you consistently built your skill set and knowledge in preparation for non-academic work? How did you not lose this vision during this vicissitudes of your PhD research?
I don't know that I systems. I mean, if I think through like the 12 months leading up to when I got my first full-time job post, or at the end of my graduate degree, like the two things that I remember being very intentional and organized about was doing a lot of networking. I was trying to do like 2 informational interviews per week, which meant that I was like scheduling 2 every week for 2 or 3 weeks out, and then conducting a couple a week. So I think trying to stay organized, tracking all those contacts, trying to stay organized about like, Monday's the day I send out the invitations. I'm going to follow up if I haven't heard a week from that Monday, and just trying to keep that pipeline going. It's exhausting. It's a lot of effort. That was something I was really intentional about. And then when I started applying to jobs, it can be emotionally draining applying to jobs and getting rejected a lot, right, in my case. So I think trying to set goals for, I'd like to do this many applications per week. I'm not going to do any of this weekend. Like I need a break.
Right.
Sort of those were the things I was really intentional about. Besides that, I took a break. This was not intentional. It just got to a point where there was probably like a summer that I did not make any progress on my dissertation, just because it was like very overwhelming. And actually taking that break was healthy because I came back with renewed focus and renewed energy. So I don't regret doing that. And I just needed to get this, like my job, like, and my career settled, and like figured out a little bit. Yeah. But prior to like when I was actually like applying to jobs, I was just trying to treat my dissertation like a job, to kind of get in that habit of like, I will be at my Carol at, 8:30 a.m. and I will work until 5 p.m. and then I will go to the gym, and then I will have dinner. Like I was really trying and putting an effort to try to make progress on that.
Absolutely. I think organization is key, and also just setting long-term goals, but also short-term goals that will get you to that long-term achievement that people are seeking. So thank you so much for this question. We have an additional question from Henry. What resources of career development did you use at Princeton, and which are the most useful or helpful?
So what was available to me when I was a student here is like a fraction of what is available now. And if I were a student now, I would be taking advantage of like everything I could possibly handle without driving myself crazy. Right. So like, I think going to events is great. Like virtual events, taking notes. If the speaker provides their email address, or like my email address is on my company website, so people can just find it, like following up with that person, connecting with them on LinkedIn, sending a nice LinkedIn note to say, I saw your talk, I'd be interested in connecting. I post things on LinkedIn. So, people who are in my network will see, when we're hiring for fellows, or we'll see, job postings or opportunities that are in my network. So just connecting on LinkedIn. Sometimes if people have a specific follow-up, like emailing people, asking to set up 20 minutes, or sending a few questions by email, and just wanting to connect. I think that those are great. I think career fairs are okay. Like, I think if there's a career fair around you, it's worth it to go and to check it out. I think sometimes it's helpful to have a plan when you go to a career fair. Like if you've looked at the employers in advance, so that you're able to kind of know, like, this is whose table I want to stop by and kind of learn about, rather than just showing up. I think that's probably the best way to do that. But also like signing up for practice interviews, resume reviews, like these were things that were offered through the Career Center when I was here, but maybe they weren't as tailored to graduate students specifically. And I know that I went out to my personal network and got a lot of great feedback on my application materials. But I think now more of that at the right sort of sort of level and the way it's tailored to graduate students. I think a lot more of that exists on campus.
Absolutely. And I think that's absolutely right. Earlier, we were talking with another student who's a PhD in English, and they actually just informed me that they hired someone to specifically help PhDs in the humanities develop resumes. So I haven't reached out yet, but that's definitely on my list. Great. We have another question from Andrew, and Andrew is saying, thanks so much for this riveting conversation. Had to step away for a minute, so forgive me if this has been asked already. What advice would you give to the humanities faculty who are advising students who are interested in careers beyond the academy? Great question, Andrew.
Wow. Yes, great question. So I think, first of all, normalizing the conversations and role modeling, because again, in my experience, faculty are, for the most part, fairly supportive and accepting, but there's a lot of peer pressure. And I think some of the peer pressure comes from students not knowing how these conversations are going with advisors. So I think normalizing it in faculty events and talking about it more, I think normalizes it for everyone and makes it much more easy to have these conversations.
Right.
I think faculty bringing, tracking where alumni get employed 2 or 3 years out of graduation, and bringing people back to their departments to say, this is someone who is happy in their non-academic job and is going to kind of talk to you about that. I think that's fantastic.
Absolutely.
I think, in terms of expectations, and I kind of talked about this earlier, I think faculty, their main role as mentors is academic mentors. And I think that's what they should do. And I think it's totally appropriate to have other mentors to mentor other aspects of your professional development. But I do think I can't say how meaningful it is for an academic advisor to just ask, how is your job search going?
Right.
Or what did you do in the last quarter or in the last 4 months that was about professional development or career development that was non-academic?
Right.
And I remember one time when one of my advisors asked that, just asking the question, not needing to necessarily be able to advise or give advice, but just asking that question was really important for the emotional support.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we're almost around time, and I wanted to ask you this question so that students who are here present can learn a little bit more about the opportunities that Ithaka and Ithaka S+R offer for graduate students here at Princeton. I am currently doing a fellowship with JSTOR Daily within Ithaka, and I want other students to be able to take advantage of the same opportunities. So can you tell us about the various opportunities that your organization offers specifically to Princeton students?
Yes, absolutely. So I launched the fellowship program at Ithaka back in 2018, and we've grown substantially from having one fellow, and that fellow was actually in partnership with Princeton. So it's a very long and deep sort of history that goes back up until now. And we have, at this point, we're pretty close to finalizing our summer cohort, which will be a cohort of 9 students, I'm expecting. So our largest cohort to date. I'm incredibly excited about that. Our fellowships place fellows in one of several teams around Ithaka. So I'm part of Ithaka S+R, which is our strategy and research branch, but we also, the Ithaka family also includes JSTOR, so you're with JSTOR Daily, and Portico and Art Store. And so there's different teams. There's JSTOR Daily, there's JSTOR Labs, there's Reveal Digital. So there's opportunities doing a lot of different kinds of things. Like JSTOR Daily is journalism, Reveal Digital is archival work. So sort of different kinds of professional experiences. Absolutely. We offer the fellowships. At this point, we're doing it 2 cohorts per year. So we have a winter cohort. The applications for that are usually in mid to late fall. And then that's for a start date, usually in January or February through around mid to late April. And then we have a summer cohort that's usually early June to late August. So I think people should just keep an eye on, on the Ithaka website for when the roles get posted. And, I advise people just to keep an open mind, right? I have had so many fellows who applied and thought for sure they were going to end up with one team and ended up with a different team and having a phenomenal experience both ways. Like, you know, both the manager was super thrilled and the fellow was super thrilled. But I don't know if you just want to take 30 seconds to talk about your experience, but.
Absolutely. I mean, when I applied, I put different teams as potentials for me. And then I ended up with JSTOR Daily. Like Colette mentioned, it's more around journalism, publishing, and editing. And it's been an amazing experience because I wanted to bring my research, academic research, into conversation with current events. And it's been such a great experience. And working with that team has been incredible. And they pushed me in ways I didn't know I would be pushed. And I've learned so much from it. And I really encourage all students to take advantage of this opportunity. Absolutely. And I don't think I have any more questions, but I just want to give you a chance in case you have any final words before we conclude the session.
Thank you again for being part of this session with me. I really appreciate it. I really enjoyed this conversation. I just encourage people to look me up on LinkedIn, connect, reach out for a conversation. I care a lot about this topic for graduate students. I think it's really important. I'm honored to be here, and I hope I'll be hearing from some folks.
Thank you so much, Colette, and thank you, everyone.